uh, seven excellent panelists. We have with us Fernando Santiago, who has been coaching me on technical issues on the side here. Fernando is an industrial policy officer at UNIDO. UNIDO's Division of Industrial Policy and Capacity Development. He's also a member of the scientific board of LALIX, a very well-known Latin American network of STI researchers, and the UNIDO focal point for the UN-IATT, which brings us this particular meeting today. We also have with us Yang Jing. She's an associate research fellow of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and Technology for Development. She has a PhD in philosophy and is a postdoctoral fellow in applied economics. Yang Jing mainly engages in research work in the fields of digital transformation, national innovation system, and science and technology policy. Alessandro Bello is a consultant with 12 years of international experience in collaboration with various UN agencies, governments, and development organizations across more than 40 countries, focusing on strengthening inclusive and transformative STI systems. He holds a master's degree in governance and political science from universities of Pisa and Bologna. We have another UN colleague with us, Manuel Ricardo Galindo Moreno. He is an STI policy expert at UNESCO with over 15 years of experience spanning international organizations and startups. He specializes in leveraging data-driven tools and emerging technologies to support evidence-based policymaking, including the development of global STI policy databases and the application of machine learning for policy benchmarking. Manuel holds a master's degree in innovation management and entrepreneurship from University of Manchester. We have with us as well Bitrina Diamet. She has been working in areas of STA policy, research, and analysis for over 30 years now. Academically, Bitrina obtained her MA in Science and Technology Policy in 1993 and a PhD in Development Studies, focusing on innovation and development in 2010. Professor Maria Dorcas Kane is a Chief Research Scientist at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana, and Associate Professor of Biotechnology at the CSIR College of Science and Technology. She is also the Deputy Director General of the CSIR and responsible for research and development, resource mobilization, and quality assurance. She holds a PhD in Botany Plant Physiology from the University of Ghana. And last but not least, Dr. Roland Kakwakwa is the Acting Director of Education, Science, and Culture at the ECOWAS Commission, where he leads initiatives to strengthen STI across West Africa. He leads programs such as the ECOWAS Research and Innovation Forum and workshops aimed at enhancing research methodologies among scientists. Dr. Kwaku is also a strong advocate for open science principles, promoting greater access to scientific knowledge and fostering innovation throughout the region. And myself, Dimo Cholowski, I work at UNCTAD, and I spend most of my time either designing capacity building or doing national policy, STI national policy reviews for developing countries, mainly in Africa in the recent years. So can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So today we will have these four discussions. We will start out with a very brief discussion by me, as you've all had the opportunity to look at the video, and hopefully that has satisfied some of your curiosity. After me, it'll be Fernando with some musings. We will have a very comprehensive view from Dr. Roland, and afterwards from Yin Yang on a very interesting issue of research organization and management models, which is a very specific, but I find always missing type of policy instrument. We will start out, in fact, with a few Mentimeters, and we will continue with another Mentimeter after Yin Yang's presentation. So let's Min, can we I think you're all well versed in the Mentimeter. I think we had a very good Mentimeter session yesterday. So let's go out with the first Mentimeter question, just to get a feel of the audience and the experience here that we have had. So please scan the QR code on your mobile phones and to go to the possible answers and fill in your perspective. So the question here is, what is your level of knowledge related to STI policy instruments? Clearly, a lot of people are interested or have some knowledge of SDA policy. But then, what are these SDA policy instruments? What is the difference? How do they work together? What is going on? So I see we already have quite a few people who are familiar with the concept, and some are even experts. This promises some very good discussions, some good questions and answers. But I think that there is even some general familiarity with the concept, even if not in total with the practice. Can we have some more? Yes, please. Thank you very much. Some more answers. Uh, so I think the baseline here is that there's a broad familiarity. We have a few people who have actually designed a policy instrument or an STI policy instrument. I suppose this also, if you say you are an expert, perhaps you are even on a higher level than just having participated in the design. So thank you very much. So we have about half of the population here, if we can extrapolate, is expert. The other half has some knowledge. Now, so thank you very much. I think we can move to the next one. So here's what is your level of experience related to policy instrument implementation? We'll talk about this a bit more in the actual second part of the session. One thing is to draft projects and documents and draft proposals for policies or policy instruments. Another whole thing is to actually take that idea, that concept, that project, that activity that's spelled out through some kind of framework or structure, and actually go and start doing it. And this is where we encounter quite a few problems and challenges in the actual implementation phase. So what do we have here? So clearly, we're a bit heavy on concepts from the previous question. Here we're a bit lighter. About half of the people say that, or third say that this is the first time that we're going to discuss an implementation process, and I hope it kicks them off in the right direction. The discussions we'll have later, but also soothes them in the sense that policy instrument implementation is a very difficult process. And if you find that there's a bit of a struggle, there's a bit of anxiety in this, you're not alone. Everyone has these similar issues. So you're a member of a large sisterhood and brotherhood of people who struggle with the challenges of policy instrument implementation. I think we're pretty good on that. So there are people who have been who have some knowledge who have a lot of knowledge on the concepts, but in the implementation phase, a bit so less, and therefore I hope this actual session will be somewhat useful. Okay, so thank you very much for your contributions as Mentimeter. I hope this has also given you a feel among yourselves where you are as a group. Nadia, can we continue with my slides, please? We were on slide number 5. While Nadia, okay, thank you very much. So my specific discussion is actually just underlining a few salient points that were in the video. Next slide, please. The video you saw talked about the definitions of public policy, definitions of policy instruments, types of policy instruments, specific policy instruments that are frequently used in STI, SDA policy instruments that are then even more specifically in support of the SDGs. The video talked about the policy instrument design process, some of the pitfalls and risks in policy instrument design, and a few examples of successful policy instruments for STI. Next slide, please. Now, important to understand that all of this that was in the video is actually in a handout. I've posted this link a few times. I'm posting again now in the chat. Please download this handout. If you want to give me any comments about it, some insights and so forth, that would be really great. But this is kind of the material that was the script that was used for the video. Next slide, please. We saw that some discussions on definitions of policy instruments, specifically tools or mechanisms used by governments to implement their policies and achieve desired outcomes. I think that's a good general definition. Next slide, please. We saw that we can categorize policy instruments many different ways. I like to start off with type of failure, because STI policy is a domain that tries to address failures. We're always thinking, why is not STI contributing enough to economic and social development? So the question is, where have we failed? And this type of structure leads us to very specific, specific policy instruments. Next slide, please. However, previous. One more. There you go. Thank you. So many public policy theorists and practitioners, they like to categorize policy instruments by the type of activity they have: regulatory, economic, informational, etc. Next, please. There you go. However, there are many ways to slice and dice policy instruments. Sometimes we use categorizations such as long and short-term policy instruments, because there's always this idea of, when you're doing policy implementation, go for the long-hanging fruit first, because it is politically opportune. You don't want to get into a new policy that you've proposed in your society, and all of a sudden it starts failing colossally. So I think so this is why we have this long and short-term supply demand type policy instruments is also a valid thing. We can stimulate demand or supply of STI in different places. They work a little bit differently. Sectoral, horizontal, challenge-based, for example, policy instruments that directly address sustainable development goals, or we may also categorize them by which stakeholders or stakeholder groups we're targeting. Next, please. Finally, what we need to understand is that all policies, and even some very comprehensive policy instruments, which are kind of a secondary level below the overall macro national policies, they are always implemented, or very often, through a policy instrument mix. So it's not one policy instrument that kind of works on its own. Usually there is a main one, but there's a couple of others surrounding it to provide a kind of a policy instrument mix or a policy instrument ecosystem. Next slide, please. So common policy instruments for STI. There's a list there. Next slide, please. I'm not going to enumerate them now. These were in the video. The presentations will be shared. Policy instruments in support of SDGs. They have a few special characteristics. Unlike normal policy instrument and their goals, they tend to be a bit complex, because they address complex societal challenges. So there's always a mix there. The capacity to design and deploy policy instruments that address sustainable development goals often require parallel intervention. So there's no sequence to follow. We do this first, then we do the next one. Very often, everything has to happen at the same time for things to work. This can be a huge problem, both in the design and in the implementation, especially if you're going to projectize a policy design through some kind of a theory of change or log frame, or any one of these tools that we often use when we want to have a good design and a good implementation. They need to be specific to sustainable development in a very obvious way, mostly in order to garner support among the broad community. Very often, instruments in support of SDGs need to work directly with innovators. So it cannot be something that is 3 or 4 degrees apart. There's a fund who then select, and then these people, they work with the technology, and so it's the technology center who eventually invent something, and then so it has to be kind of directly with the innovators. There has to be a certain I think entrepreneurial quality about policy instruments and their support to innovators. And I think global policy, in order for policy instruments for SDGs to work, they need to work on improving the enabling environment for these particular STI policies for SDGs to work. Next slide, please. So examples of policy instruments in support for SDGs, like I said, please consult the handout that is in the link. There's on page 6, there's a huge table. You may look at that. We did this categorization just a few years ago. I think it still stands. So please consult that. Next slide, please. The design process is much like the design process for the national policies. The only thing I would like to underline here is that designing the implementation plan is not the implementation. The design of the implementation plan goes together with the design of the policy instrument. The implementation plan is then linked to the design through the implementation is linked to the design through the implementation plan. But if you design a policy instrument and leave the thinking about designing the implementation later, I think this is kind of a path for a fairly not so good result. So I would just like to underline that last point, that in the design of a policy instruments, already at the very beginning, the design of the implementation plan needs to be one of the key figures. And I would like to add, it's not only monitoring and evaluation, but it's also the learning component. How does this policy instrument, once it goes through its implementation, how does it feed back into the next generation of policy instrument? Which wisdom has been gathered? Which new knowledge has been developed? Which experience can be useful for the next time? Next slide, please. Some pitfalls and risks in policy instrument design: mismatch between instruments' objectives, underestimating complexity. This is a huge issue, in particular when the complexity means that you need to collaborate with many other stakeholders. We all know that governments and government agencies have this horrible habit of siloing and being very in words collaborative, but then when it comes to actual action, there can be a lot of problems with the lack of concrete implementation, collaboration and implementation, neglecting stakeholder interests, overlooking contextual factors. They can be many, from climate change, political situations, and so forth, changing geopolitics. Nowadays, we see a lot of that. Insufficient flexibility. We have to always maintain some level of flexibility as the world changes, especially if these policy instruments are more on the long-term side. Inadequate evaluation, poor feedback, and learning mechanisms result in what may be on paper a really good policy instrument, well designed, well implemented, but actually it is not the case in fact. Of course, political and economic constraints, and finally the risk of unintended consequences. I think the world abounds with these when we are trying to have a policy instrument, especially for sustainable development. Currently, one policy instrument that I find very scary myself is this geoengineering. We're going to make more clouds to reduce sunshine and so forth. I really don't know, but there are problems of unintended consequences, and if there are any of these problems that are really important, it is on the science, technology, innovation sector, genetic research, etc., etc. Next slide, please. Finally, I think the video gave some indications of some examples of successful policy instruments. The handout has references for all of these. You may look these up, download them, the actual long references for these particular policy instruments, and see whatever wisdom you can get out of them. I think that's it. One more slide. It should be the sunny one. Yes, thank you very much. So that's a wake-up slide. So thank you very much for paying attention. I will now hand over to Fernando, who will continue my discussion on and specifically take up the issue with the question of public policy and demand side policy instruments. So thank you for listening. Fernando, off to you.
Thank you, Dimo. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And thanks to all the participants for taking again the time to join us in this session. Let me just quickly move into the presentation. In this of time, I think also we would like to have more of an interaction with you, so more than just sending information. So as Dimo already presented a very comprehensive view of what the policy instruments are, what they do. And we tend to see, as he mentioned, the different functions. But in real life, we also understand them mostly as supply side. So normally governments think of instruments as something that they use to to promote certain activities. Whereas I think in this case for developing countries, one of the issues that we normally find as an explanation of why the dynamics of the systems is not as strong as in other more advanced countries is because of this need to close the loop. There is no counterpart in terms of the demand for those technologies, particularly for technologies that are created inside the country. So what I will just walk you through this conversation now, see supply and demand for innovation as sort of two sides of the same coin, and how instruments can be used for that. I'm going to make an emphasis on demand, because that's, as I said, one of the areas that we normally tend to neglect. I will just use an example for public procurement, and then we conclude and hopefully have some time for conversation later on. So as many economists know, I mean, many of you might be engineers, but most of us who have an economics background, we look at markets, market dynamics. And of course, markets comprise a supply side, meaning companies, or in this case, universities. We think of knowledge as something that is created, used, disseminated to the economy, and there are institutions that are responsible for that. And of course, the government have a mandate to support that. For example, research at universities, education systems, companies to try and sell the products and technologies, but also the market also closes the loop by looking at the demand side. So who is the user of the knowledge? Who is the user of the product, of the service? Who is the consumer of that good or service that is provided in the market? So the interactions that are relevant is not just to understand supply or demand, but how these in a dynamic system create a market that creates a space for a dynamic system of innovation. And you can think of this, for example, R&D creating variety. You create some new products, new services. We hope that this is going to be selected in the market. That's a competitive process. Yeah. So the R&D creates variety, the market and the consumers and the interactions create a selection mechanism, so that those goods and services that really meet the demand of the consumers are the ones that thrive in the market. And so what we see now, and that was important, what Dimo mentioned on the context of SDGs, we have this challenge now to create a system where, of course, we balance economic outcomes with inclusiveness and environmental. But also you see an emphasis, and that's also something that Dimo mentioned in terms of geopolitics. There is a strong emphasis now on being more competitive, being more diversified, but in some cases, and that attains to technology, many countries are very concerned about their ability to create the technologies that they need, and they to be certain degree of autonomy and not depend so much. So there's really this tension, who creates the technology, who has the capacities to create the technologies. And so in a way, you can see also through some of the initiatives in some countries, the consumers are becoming a part of the change agent. Yeah? So this focus on demand is very strong, also connecting innovation and industrial policy. You saw my colleague Christoph talking about this in session 1. So what it means is that, in terms of global economic dynamics, you see a need for enhanced coordination, collaboration, and perhaps some countries are trying to decouple. So what it means for economic system, that's also an open question. But we see, and also that's something that Dimo mentioned on the video that you had the chance to watch. The role of government here. So there are two ways in which, at least, in which the government can foster the demand for innovation. Yeah. So there are one area which we call targeting the framing conditions. Yeah. In this case, you can see, the government facilitating upgrading industrial development by, addressing market failures. Under the Dimo mentioned this idea of failures and how governments can support companies to address those market failures or system failures. Right? The government can also promote capability building by adopting new technologies, creating incentive programs for trainings. But in some cases, and something that is not necessarily understood well, is the government is also a very important source of information, a very important source of ideas and demand for companies to focus on the efforts for R&D and innovation. Yeah? But in some cases, the government takes a more active role, and this is just a way for the governments to guide the process of innovation, either by facilitating the creation of awareness among the consumers. You can think of those initiatives to favor the consumption of more environmental sustainable products, Yeah, you can also introduce regulations. You can also be an actor. You know, some of these consortium where the government provides also funding, but also is participant of the innovation process. And then something that is very important, and I will try to sum in, is this role of government as consumer. I mean, the government is a major actor in terms of demanding from the economy goods and services for the provision of specific services. Yeah. So and the government's one of the main tools that they use to achieve the goals is through public procurement. And in this case, public procurement, you can understand governments are different entities, governments at the municipal, state, or national level. What they need is to provide some public services, some public goods, and they usually do it in connection or in collaboration with third parties, companies or public owned enterprises, you know, that they provide on behalf of the government these services. So what is important to understand here is that the government usually purchases services not for the sake of consuming the service, but because that's the way for the government to achieve an intended goal. So the service that they buy it's in the benefit of a third party, right? So in this case, that's why you can see public procurement being a heavily regulated activity. And in some ways, like the transparency, the accountability, and the way public procurement is carried out. It's also a way to identify whether many of these governments and countries are reliable. Are some countries where people would like to invest because there are rules of the game that are transparent, that are observed on the legal practice. Right? So this is also has an implication for the economic activity in general. As Dimo mentioned, the complexity of designing instruments is not simply because an instrument can be used in many different forms, and you can see here, according to the UNCITRAL, this UN Commission on International Trade Law, they sort of we talk about public procurement, but we talk about many different things and how these things are designed, how these things are implemented, how these things are combined, not only within the realm of public procurement, but also public procurement combined with other initiatives. It's also a complex process. Yes, it requires certain capacities and certain ways of doing things. So this is really an area where, although many countries try to use this, it's not an easy area to work on. But also it's not easy to do it because actually, even though it's a very important activity, we know very little about this. But to start with, there's not enough data. There's not really a way to understand how much governments spend in public procurement. Yeah. This is a data that I obtained from, you see the source there. What these researchers did were to sort of try to estimate some of the volume of purchase of the government. They had a very systematic exercise to collect the data, to fill gaps. So it's very statistically heavy in terms of reconstructing the data. But you can already see is that these countries in green, it's really those countries that actually represent the large share of the public procurement globally. This is around 77% of the, so 16 countries, around 77% of the value of the public procurement globally, right? And out of those, around China and the US are actually about the 48 to 50% of the of the market. So the rest of the governments or the countries really don't use systematically, or they don't leverage public procurement in a way that could be used. I mean, many of the operations or transactions that are involved here belong to military things, and so it's really also difficult to appreciate some of these things. But you have a very strong correlation between the size of the GDP of the economy and the weight of the public procurement in the economy, right? And this, of course, is an important aspect when we think about the resources that are available for innovation and how to use the public service or the public purchasing power to track innovation. But we have to be conscious, that there are pros and cons. Of course, public procurement has a good aspect in the sense that it can create a market for innovative technologies, products, and services. The government can stimulate can be a lead user, so that it, in a way, takes a bit of the risk for the companies to develop a product that maybe the demand is not there. So see, for example, some countries are very ambitious in creating new opportunities to enter the aerospace industry, but it's a very risky and high tech. So maybe the government provides that opportunity, proper commercial development. And of course, what it does is to create an incentive to enhance the rate of return on investment that makes the investment innovation attractive for the companies. But it can also be on the opposite side. If not provided, I mean, it's not just that you have a government that procures services. In a way, when procurement becomes a routinized activity where you emphasize the importance of the product and the cost over the service that this provides, it can also create an incentive to destroy innovation capabilities. For example, here, I mean, there's also very little information you can find for developing countries, but in a way, looking at German experience, there's a study that and you can see the study there cited at the bottom of the slide. What these companies that were focusing only on product price and just meeting the specification required by the government, they actually reduce the incentive for R&D efforts, and they also tend to establish more on established products and reducing the incentives for innovation, and by focusing more in cost reduction processes, but not in actually bringing new products. So the idea here is that adding new or additional criteria is difficult to implement because the companies are so entrenched in this process that they have to develop the new investments in acquiring skills, in new processes, and that somehow can reduce the incentive. So it really is also important to understand how procurement is used in a country where the tradition of transparency and using the purchasing power to mobilize innovation is different. And so one of the things here that you can see is not talking about just public procurement, but really sort of strategically using public procurement now as a tool to develop innovation. And as Dimo mentioned, for example, one of the areas that is very interesting to see now when you try to shift from this traditional procurement approach to something that is more dynamic and fostering innovation is you have to identify needs. And sort of some of these are societal problems. To transform that into a need that the government wants to address, of course, it goes into a process of defining how that solution would look like, for a possible problem. And then go to the tendering process, describing the technology, the product service, but not in a way that you have a sort of well-defined product, but you are asking for solutions properly. So you can imagine if I have to address a problem of water safety, you don't ask for a filter, you ask for a solution, how to make water more, safe, And of course, you go to the evaluation of the tender. In some cases, in this case, implies that there is a stronger interaction between the government as the buyer and the potential provider to really fine-tune these processes of delivering the technology, and then delivery process. So let me emphasize, in this case of using public procurement as a way to obtain solutions or functional specifications rather than product specifications. You're not asking for a table, but you're asking a device, well, not for a car or a bicycle, but you're asking a solution for a mobility problem. But this implies, of course, requirements in terms of, it has to be strategic. You have to have a very well-defined plan or program how to use procurement and how to use it in a way that is transparent, is accountable. You can problematize a solution in the sense that you want a solution, not just a product or a service. And that, of course, implies understanding the concept of directionality and speed, right? So when, how, who is going to benefit from that? And in capacity building, we also tend to think of capacity building on the side of companies, but when you move into these more dynamic processes of strategic public procurement, what you are actually asking is governments to develop also the ability to carry out a more complex process of doing the procurement, And so the capacities go back in the sense of what Christophe presented in day one, the idea of, do we have the government with the ability to carry out these kind of processes, or what do they need to achieve this? So I will not read all of this. You will have access to this presentation after the webinars, but just to mention, again, reemphasize what Dimo mentioned in his presentation, sometimes the instrument is not just the way governments transform policies into actual actions, but they also respond to a context. They also respond to interest. and respond to a tradition, and whether the governments are used to support innovation, and to what extent they have the experience, the capacity, and the means to do these interventions. Yeah, and these instruments, particularly thinking on fostering demand, helps developing countries to sort of have broader opportunities to foster, homegrown innovations, to the companies, to create incentives for them to be more technologically engaged, right? And so, but there are different ways of governments to act and different ways to combine different interventions. So it's important to know also that public procurement is there as an activity that is suitable to foster innovation, but in some cases, the way you drive this activity can have positive, but also can have some effects that are not desirable in terms of promoting incentives. So I would just leave it there, and thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, looking forward for your comments. Thank you. Dimo, back to you.
Thank you very much, Fernando. I think our presentations were very complimentary, and hopefully these two together, they have moved the discussion at least a little bit forward. But now, to bring us back to real life, I wish to invite Dr. Roland Kouakou to bring us up to date on what has been happening in terms of policy instruments design and implementation in the ECOWAS region. Please, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Dimo. Thank you. I hope that you can see my presentation. You can see the slide?
No.
Not yet.
No. Perhaps we can ask. Let's see.
Okay, let me. Can you see it now?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, is okay now?
Yes, but you will have to use the page down button rather than scrolling to keep the
No
the screen.
problem. Yeah. I will do it. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dimo. Thank you, all the participants. I think that some definition has been done by Mr. Dimo, so I will try to go very fast in my presentation. For ECOWAS is one of the regional committee based in Africa. West Africa is the West African Economic that is part of African Union structure. So we have already designed our policy. I will be focused. We have already designed our policy in science, technology, and innovation based on some challenges that countries are facing. In 2012, we noticed that many of the countries in West Africa did not have policies and also structure in the national, let's say, countries. Also, there was a problem of lack of funding for research institution, and also the lack of training for all the researchers in the region. And we noticed that there was also lack of incentive to motivate the researcher within the region. So based on some challenges that we are facing, we developed our policies in 2012 with a five years action plan that was reviewed in 2015. And this year, 2025, we have already reviewed the policy that was aligned to ECOWAS Vision 2050. And also, we are part of this teaser. Sorry, can you see it, my presentation? Hello?
If you could just scroll down a little bit more, that
Okay.
would be.
Okay.
Just one more touch.
Okay.
Yes, it's fine. Please go ahead.
I can go ahead because
Yes,
I don't
please
see it here. That's what I'm trying to
Yes.
on my screen.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Very sorry. I just saw Mr. Dimo's name. I don't saw my presentation.
We see your screen. If you could just push the arrow button or the page down button, we will. Yeah, it's fine. Please continue.
Okay. Is the name of Mr. Dimo that I can see? I cannot see my presentation again.
We see your presentation.
Okay.
No, not a problem.
So, okay. So,
Please continue.
I don't see it on my flight here. That's why my screen here.
Yes. I had the same problem this morning. So, but please continue. Please continue. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just give me just 30 seconds. So I will. Okay. So we developed what we call a regional policy that is, the name is ECOPOS, that has been reviewed and aligned to the ECOWAS Vision 2050 and the STISA 2034, and also aligned to the SDG. ECOPOS review was addressed to facing some challenges in the world. What happened, you remember 2020, the COVID time, and also because the first policy that we designed was not addressed to open science, to artificial intelligence, and some emerging technologies. We developed the instrument that we use. Okay, we have what we call two types of instruments: sectorial and horizontal instruments. ECOPOS was designed by using the horizontal instrument, and the instrument that we use in ECOWAS was financial instrument. This financial instrument includes also grants, research aid, and funding for scientific research and technology. So based on our action plan, we have what we call in ECOWAS the community levy that's giving 0.5% of funds to support ECOWAS program in the region. We have a budget that can support some action, and we have also, based on our action plan, we design a program that's called Paris Grant that's giving $400 to support the regional research project in ECOWAS by asking the researcher to be in a consortium. At national level, you can see that based on our report, 2020 report from in ECOWAS, some countries like Benin, they have already established National Fund for Research and Innovation in 2012. Sorry, the country like Cote d'Ivoire have also established a national fund that's called FONARI. If you go to Ghana, they have also national research fund that was supposed to bring 50 million US dollar. And in Nigeria, we have the National Research Fund managed by the higher education toward what we call the third fund. We have the regulatory instruments. Of course, in the presentation of Mr. Dimo, we have some standards, regulation, and law. But in ECOWAS, we have what we call the decision makers at the head of state. And when we adopted the policy, there was what we call the supplementary act, and also a directive on STI, and a regulation that was adopted for the creation of a Center of Excellence to support the implementation of the policy within the region. At national level, for example, we can see that many of the countries, they have also adopted STI legal and regulatory framework. For example, in Nigeria, Nigeria have already put in place appropriate framework to establish a National Research and Innovation Council that currencies that shared by the president of the country. And most of the country, for example, they have also signed the treaty of some international agreements like the one for intellectual property, OAP, ARIPO, or WIPO. That is just the information I just want to give. In terms of incentive instrument that we have, our policy ECOPOS through the Paris program is giving $400 per annual. Is a competitive fund that we are also giving to the researcher to create a consortium and also to develop regional projects so they can benefit for this fund. Actually, four consortia has been put in place in the region, and they are benefiting for more than 1 million, and $200 million. At national level, all the countries have already also established, they have grants that they are giving to students. Also, at national level, some prize of excellence has been established, for example, for Côte d'Ivoire since 2013. To the best lecturer and researcher. In Senegal, we have 2 prizes. Prize for the President of the Republic grant for science, and also a prize from the President of the Republic for invention. In Nigeria, they have also Science Prize Award that they are giving since 2024. And also we have Olusegun Obasanjo Prize for Science Discovery. In terms of cooperation instruments that we have, the instrument is to facilitate the collaboration between scientists within the region. From the policy that we have developed, we negotiated fund from the African Development Bank to establish a regional project, SNICE and UN-IATT project, with $26 million to establish network among national institutions like 2I in Ouagadougou and also AUST in Abuja. Actually, we are going for the 3rd phase that will bring more than 3 institutions within the region. The Paris program that we have established enhance cooperation between national institutions from Anglophone, Francophone, and Lusophone. At national level, all the member states have also established various instruments for bilateral, multilateral cooperation with countries in the world and also at a regional and international cooperation. In terms of communication and infrastructure information instrument, we just conclude with the African Forum on Research and Innovation in Cotonou last week, just 2 weeks ago. It's a forum that we have developed just to bring all the decision makers, all the stakeholders to discuss about science. And it's also a platform for awareness, a platform for campaign, a platform for discussion, and also a platform to exhibit everything concerning, let's say, innovation. At national level, all the member states have established also national symposia, forum, and scientific cluster, and also association and network. In terms of governance instruments, these instruments are aimed to organize the STS sector. Within the ECOWAS structure, of course, we have a directorate that is managing everything concerning science, and also we have the ITS directorate to develop technology information. At national level, we have a high-level national body whose mission is to define science and technology policy. This body comes in a various form: commission, national council, ministry, or ministerial department. Within the ministry, for example, we have sometimes, based on the report that we have, coordinating and monitoring the research activity for all research institutions, including those who carry dissemination and also cooperation between institutions. For monitoring and evaluation instruments, in the structure of ECOWAS. We have a directorate that is involved, that also is in charge of monitoring evaluation, that monitor and evaluate all the program that has been put in place within the commission. And also we have what we call one ARP that we call ECOLINK, that is using by our commission to monitor all the program and activity within the region. At national level, we have, of course, also the monitoring system that is based in the region. I would like to conclude that for institutional mechanisms in ECOWAS, we have what we call the experts meeting, the experts meeting in science, technology, and innovation that it has been established by our treaty. The expert meeting is bringing all the directors in charge of STI within the region, all the experts, all the associations that they are involved for science, all the network to discuss about science. We have, of course, also our directorate, and all the conclusion that coming from the expert meeting is sending to the minister that they are the decision makers. And from the decision makers, now we go to the head of state. Actually, we have one council that is not yet established. It's the Regional Strategy Orientation Council that we are going to establish by 2026, because ECOWAS, we have already also established the West African Network of National Academies of Science that will be part of the Regional Strategy Orientation Council. Thank you very much. This is the overview of what we have established in ECOWAS. So I'm waiting for the question to give more information. Thank you, Mr. Dimo.
Thank you, Roland. That was a very, very excellent and comprehensive presentation. I have a list of questions for you already, so don't go away. But before that, we have one more speaker in the first half. I'd like to present to you Dr. Yin Yang, and she will be discussing research organization management models. The floor is yours, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dimo. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Yan Jing, and I'm from the CASTIT. That is the Chinese Academy of Science and Technology for Development. And today I will talk about the digital transformation of scientific research management. And there are three, and it mainly includes three parts of the content. The first part is the background and definition, and the second part is the significance and the influence, and the last part is a case study. Let's look at the background. As we know, the digitalization is having a profound impact on the social and economic activity. From the revolution in internet search and e-commerce to the proliferation of the social networks, the emergence of the new product technologies like 3D printing and the growing deployment of the artificial intelligence. Most of these changes have been driven by the private section and the although built on a very long history of the public investment in R&D in the underlying technologies, the application of digital technology in government departments is still relatively slow. So, what is the digital transformation of the scientific research management? We think it is a process of applying the modern information and the communication technologies and digital management concepts in the main business of scientific research management. Through building the information systems and sharing the scientific research resources, it realizes the digitalization of management decisions, management structures, and management processes, thereby continuously optimizing the organizational management model and improve the efficiency and level of scientific research management. So from the definition, we can see the keywords are the information system and the scientific research resources. And the scientific research management business includes the following various links, such as the scientific research plans, the equipment, funds, and the personnel, and the projects, papers, and patents. So the digital transformation of scientific research management is of great significance. First of all, scientific research management relies on data to assist in decision making. For example, in the process of project management, it is more urgent to use digital technology to optimize the basic processes such as project plan formulation and experiment and the acceptance. And secondly, organizational structure tends to develop in a platform-based and flat manner. For example, the digital technologies enable the information to flow and be shared smoothly among the different departments and the hierarchical levels. Certainly, the process reshaping highlights the concept of the taking researchers as the core. Researchers are the real end users, and the ultimate goal of scientific research management is to achieve an efficient connection between the needs of the vast number of researchers and the resources. And finally, open sharing of scientific data effectively stimulates the scientific research and the innovation. Next, I will focus on introducing the data governance case of a certain research institute. There is a large amount of data in different departments of this research institute, but this data have the following problems: unknowable, unlinkable, unreliable, unmanageable, and uncontrollable. So we can call the 5U. And after discovering these problems, the governance includes the following 4 steps. The step 1 is identifying identifying the concerns. What are the key concerns of the stakeholders? The stakeholders include the management, that include the institute leader and the department leaders, and the construction party, that is the business department, and the user party, that is the researchers. And the step 2 is to set goals, how to set measurable indicators in stages. The overall vision is the noble, obtainable, usable, controllable, reliable, and value added. And it can also be subdivided into multiple phased goals. That is the data inventory, construction, and data governance, operation, and data value released. And the step 3 is compile the standards, clarify the reference standards for the objections of the data governance. First is the specification for the description of the data objects and relationships. And the second is the data security specification. And the third is the data quality specification. And the fourth is the specification of the data interface. And the step 4 is the fusion process. That is the governance of the data fusion. The objective of this step is through the entity recognition and fusion of the associated data, improve the emergency response level of the heterogeneous. And the content includes the first one is enable the rapid access of the multi-source heterogeneous data, supporting the various formats such as online interfaces and the formatted data in import. And facilitating the rapid access or import of the associated data from the systems like scientific and technology reports and the scientific and technology achievements. And the second is achieve the rapid identification of elements such as the institutions and the individuals, and be able to conduct the statistic analysis according to the regions, institutions, and the individuals, so as to display the scientific research capabilities of regions, institutions, and individuals. And the third is quickly carry out the normalization and the correlation revelation of the scientific and the technology institutions and personnel, and review the indicator features such as the changing the trends of various relationships over the time and regions, the changing trends of the themes and the intensity of changes. And the last one is construct a data process of rapid decision making and provide the subject data construction services for multiple scientific fields. That's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jinjiang, for that comprehensive and very interesting and often overlooked part of the SDI Pulse Instruments tools. It's a super important one, but somehow within these huge problems and challenges that people have, somehow gets tucked away in the corners. Clearly, countries that have a lot of success in their SDI Pulse implementation will have management systems for the scientific research, and I will say a few more words about that when we close. So at this point, I'd like to open for a Q&A. I see there's Jihene Naimi. Would you like to take the floor, Jihene? Hello? Jihene Naimi? If you wish to speak, you need to unmute yourself.
Mm.
Yes, okay. Fine. So I have a few. I think Jehanan is having some problems. Going on. Okay, so we'll go on. There have been a lot of questions for our friend Dr. Roland. And clearly his presentation has stirred up a lot of interest. So I will select a couple of questions that have come to us in the chat, and I will ask Dr. Roland to please be so kind and the follow up of the meeting, try to answer several more of them in the chat. There's one question that has come from Caleb Muyiva. He says, Dr. Roland, can you please provide key insights into the degree of implementation of EcoPost and what the revised versions are, any implementation guidelines? As we see here, we often get a lot of discussions on policies that are current, that are active, that are planned, that are envisioned, and so forth. But somehow this discussion of how's it going, what are challenges, what are some of the problems, and so forth, they tend to miss the discussion. So I would ask Dr. Roland to be so kind and to please talk about degree of implementation of EcoPost and any possible revisions and challenges in implementation. Dr. Roland, can you please take the microphone?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dimo. Yeah, I've seen it. During the evaluation of the EcoPost in 2018, we all the country were called, and we did the assessment. We went through the countries. So 70% of the action were at that time implemented by the countries. When we say action, they implemented the action through some national activities. For example, when we talk about cooperation between the country with, let's say, international organization, they will show you that they have, let's say, MOU, they have some cooperation documents that prove that they have working with WIPO, with OAPs. So in terms of incentive program, from 2012 to now, 2025, you will see that many countries, they have established incentive program. Scholarship is still there, and also award has been put it in place, and for the researcher. So the degree is that 70% were implemented in 2018. Why we review the policy? We review the policy to align the policy to the new vision 2050 of ECOWAS, because the first policy was aligned to the vision 2020. This is first what I want to say. Second, we know that we are also part of the revised African Union strategy on science and technology, the STISA, with a target for 34. So we have to align our policies to the regional vision, and also to the African Union strategy. The third is that the first EcoPost that was designed in 2012 were focused on research. We're not more focused on technology and innovation. So there was a gap that we have to incorporate to put in the new policy. So when you take the new policy that we are going to publish before the end of this year, you'll see that we focus on more emerging technology. We are going to set up program on intelligence artificial. We are going to set up program on open science that we are working with closely with UNESCO. So all these aspects were not in the first let's say, the first batch of the policy. So this is maybe, I don't know if I have given more information, but this is what I can say from the question of Mr. Caleb.
Thank you, Dr. Roland. Let's have one more question, and I don't see any more in the chat, and there are a few that might be explained at length in writing. I was wondering, there was a question on let me see, ECOWAS currently comprises 12 countries. Do they have a common ITS policy? What are the priorities of this ITS policy? I assume that's STI in the French
STI.
acronym. Yes. Which
STI.
promotes, so specifically the question, which promotes community infrastructure. So STI for community infrastructure.
Yes. You know, we are talking about 12 countries, of course. When we're trying to revise the policy, it was about the 15 countries. So we consider that this policy involved the 15 countries. Of course, in terms of implementation, we are going to focus on the 12 countries now. But for infrastructure, of course, we have, when you take our role as a regional community is not to go through the country and implement program in the country. So our role is to guide the country, to give information to the country, to where we have to, the way that we have to follow, and so that by 2050 we can achieve the vision. But at regional level, we have set up program that giving, let's say, fund that can establish, can also enhance the infrastructure within the region. For example, our role is to negotiate with some partners to get funds and to support countries. That's what I made in my presentation. The first policy through AFDB, we got trust fund that we use to support two institutions within the region, 2IE in Burkina Faso and also AUST in Nigeria, to support them by building offices, by building, let's say, accommodation for students, by building laboratory. So this is our role as a community institution organization. So in the new policy that we are developing, we think that we are going also to extend our cooperation and also extend our role by building also infrastructure within the region. Actually, we know that next week AFDB will have a meeting, but we have already sent our request to AFDB to support 3 countries: Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria. I can give the name of the institution: University of Ibadan, INPHB in Cote d'Ivoire, and also in University of Amilcar Cabral. This is the decision that has been made by the president, so that we can support a network between the 3 countries, and we can have mobility of students, mobility of lecturers. This is the information that I want to give. So I don't know if I have given more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Roland. Rest assured, many of the other questions will be answered in the chat in due course.
Yes,
There
yes.
was, thank you very much. There was one particular question that came up, but I'll call Fernando. The question was, how does one move from policy objectives and translate them into concrete policy instruments? Fernando, let's hear your wisdom on this.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And that's also the part of the reason why we emphasize on capacities and the problem of allowing consultants to usually do the policy, because what happens is that the policymaker doesn't get the knowledge or all the information they need to actually translate that. I mean, you would need to then go into a deeper analysis of the situation, so what the intended objective is, and then to get a bit more into a diagnostic of the situation. Say, for example, very concretely, you say, well, you have to help companies digitalize or incorporate increasingly digitalization. One of the first questions you might need to ask yourself is, to what extent my companies are using already digital technologies? And if they are not, then what are the possible problems? Yeah? So you start getting a bit more into the details, digging deeper into the situation, and then you can create a problem tree, and then try to identify how can I address this. So, and then by asking those questions, you can also say, for example, ask, is someone doing it? Yeah, and then try to see how they are doing it. Or maybe that's a country, that's another institution, and see, can I leverage this as a policy perspective? So there is really a process where you need to consult also with the potential users. Say, now you want the companies, you want to talk to them, try to understand the problems, and then try to see where the resource. Maybe there's someone else already acting on something. So then now it's a process of really engaging with the challenge and try to identify possible solutions, either because you have some activities in house or the companies themselves are doing, and then characterize the target population, the needs, the problems, and then what are the resources you might want to have. I mean, in a very sketchy and characterized process. But Segne, I saw she shared some of the documents. I will post some of the other documents that you can share, you can consult from our perspective, but hope more or less gives you a sense of how to go about it. Thanks, Dimo.
Thank you, Fernando. I'd like to add something here, and that is that there is this realization that's coming across in the past couple of years, and that is that, in fact, we have things somewhat backwards, in the sense that we need to start from in discovering what is going to be our monitoring, evaluation, and learning process, and then actually doing the design and the implementation components. Problem is that very often we do have very good macro national level, I don't even want to call them policies, I call them STI strategies. And then there is an attempt to create a specific policy instruments. And clearly there is some effort and some achievements are here, but only in the design phase. When it comes to implementation, there's a huge problem. And that is because they're implementing a policy instrument, and by consequence a national strategy, is actual a project type work, and unless you projectize your implementation of your policy instruments, it's very easy to let them go. They fall by the wayside. And then we wind up with having to do qualitative evaluations on the fly instead of having good monitoring, good data, regular collection of evidence and surveying and so forth to know how we're going. We're going to talk a lot about this in session 3. So I would encourage all of you who are here you must join session 3, because there's going to be a lot of discussion. In 80% of the problems lie in that particular aspect of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. If that is mastered, then these other two phases are framing the overall national policy and developing the policy instruments would be much easier. In any case, even if not easier, the results will be more implementable, and you will have more real world outcomes of that. This is what I see that is slowly happening, and this realization is slowly coming across. Okay, so I don't have any more questions for now. So thank you to all those who have very actively participated in the chat. This is the chattiest webinar session I've been in myself. Looks really good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to before Manuel Ricardo, our colleague from UNESCO, takes the floor and talks about precisely this problem, the challenges and good practices for implementing SDA policy instruments. We're going to do a Mentimeter. So Min, can you put up Mentimeter 3? Rank the following from the most to least challenging in implementing SDI policy instruments. Okay, so this is a ranking exercise. You will need to move the ranking of what you think is from the least challenging to the most, from the most challenging to the least challenging. So most challenging is number 1 for time being. So that's the most challenging part. And the least challenging, was a bit surprising to me, is the task of coordination at number 8. But please contribute to this quite interesting, I think, evaluation of what is really challenging, what is really important. Okay, so coordination has leapt up on my notice. Funding is there, often the most talked about, but it's kind of in the middle. It's staying in the middle. Implementation, yes, has risen. They're competing with coordination. It's like a Formula One race of policy instrument challenges. Of course, we're all managers here to some extent, so the management quality is the least challenging one. Is excellent. I can agree with that, at least on my side. Learning, I don't know. I'm not too sure about that. If that was the case, we would not have these capacity building programs, neither mandated nor attended. I think the learning is underestimated component in life. Here it is in the last place. So my favorite one is in the last place. So let's have a few more. We only have 18 out of about 100. Please send in your votes. We need more votes for it to be a quality survey that's representative of the population. So stakeholder engagement has remained at the top for the whole time. I find this very true, that it's a serious problem. Whenever I've done 5 or 6 national STI policy reviews as principal author, of course, with the help of a few consultants. And what I always find puzzling when I visit countries where we're doing this kind of work is that the awareness of the stakeholder environment is not at the level it needs to be for an agency or ministry that does STI, because STI is a multi-stakeholder activity by definition. We have all gone past the so-called triple helix models. I'm sure you're aware of that. The government and academia and private sector. We have other civil society, environmental interests, various fragile groups, and so forth. So there's lots of stakeholders, be they by sector, within the region, engaged with a certain global sustainable development goal and so forth. So I think, okay, so that's about half. So hopefully that. So clearly funding has reached number 1, somehow has crawled up from the bottom, and learning is at the bottom. It's an interesting perspective. I will, Manuel, have you joined us now? Can you turn yourself on there? What do you think of this particular, before kicking off with your formal presentation, some comments on your side for this result? Is it normal? Is it extraordinary?
Well, actually, I would like to maybe kick off because my first slide kind of groups a little bit these perspectives. So
okay, Min, please release your share, and Manuel can start at his. Thank you, Min.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Please allow me to start my screen sharing. Can you please confirm that my screen is visible?
Yes, screen first page.
Okay, sorry, I have a little issue here. Okay, Perfect. Okay, so thank you for being here. Yeah, I think that the results of the Mentimeter are quite interesting, and allow me to maybe group these results into this in this slide. So we have been discussing about STI policies and implementation, and I think that yeah, we know that STI policies have big goals, large ambitions, but in the end, we need these mechanisms to implement the policies to be able to make sure that we actually achieve these goals. So we are here to discuss this. What are the different implementation challenges and some good practices? So first, I would like to highlight one of the main challenges that I have identified, and that you, of course, you also have shown in have selected in the Mentimeter, which are the limited resources. And here it clearly showed that the funding constraints is one of the main challenges. But I would like to also highlight that it's not only financial resources, but we also need the skilled personnel to actually implement these challenges, implement these policies, sorry. And this goes beyond having a critical mass of researchers, but it actually means that we need to have the key personnel skilled enough to actually first design the policy instruments and then execute them. So this is quite important. Something that I have also seen, and maybe allow me to change a little bit the wording of this second block, is that we usually underestimate what it is needed to implement a policy instrument. And I saw that the management quality was downstairs in the Mentimeter, and I think that this is a good reflection, because we implementing this type of instruments is quite complex. It's difficult, and sometimes they require more than what we think they need. The other point that I would like to highlight is that well, the coordination issue is big. As Dimo was mentioning, this is a multi-stakeholder. STI policies are multi-stakeholder by nature. And implementing a policy instrument requires dialogue with multiple type of actors. So I think this is something that is quite important. Now, we went through the challenges, but I would like to maybe propose a framework that would allow us to maybe overcome these challenges. And this framework, I would like to focus on these four dimensions. I will describe very briefly each of these dimensions, and then we will go in detail in the following slides. The implementation process, you actually highlighted it in the Mentimeter. This refers to what are the operational steps that we need to take to put the policy instrument into action. The other one would be the management quality. This means what is the effectiveness of the leadership, the effectiveness of the administrative processes and structures, the effectiveness in actually executing this policy instrument. We have been discussing about monitoring and evaluation. This refers to tracking progress and assessing, of course, impact. And finally, the learning systems, which means what are those mechanisms that we need to have in place for continuous learning and improvement. So let's start with one of the main focus areas that I propose, the implementation process. Just quick reminder, this means the operational steps that we need to take to put the policy instrument into action. Let's start with strategic outreach and beneficiary selection. The first one that you see in the slide, we touched a little bit about this in the Mentimeter, which is stakeholder engagement. We need to understand who are our beneficiaries, what is the target audience, and how to reach them. Just as a quick example, if we want to implement a scholarship program that is targeting young students, maybe we should think about using channels like social media. But on the other hand, if we want to promote tax incentive program to promote innovation, then we want to reach private companies, and maybe we want to focus on other channels like reaching to industry associations, try to have some workshops that brings them and explains the instrument. So basically, tailor your outreach strategy according to the beneficiaries. But what it is actually quite important in this step, it is to be able to convey to explain the instrument properly, to explain what it is, the application process, the selection criteria. This is very important because by making these things very clear to the beneficiaries, we started a process of building trust, building legitimacy, making sure that it is a transparent process, and all of these characteristics can attract better applicants and, of course, achieve better impact. Now, let's go to the second point, and let's talk about the operational delivery and financial mechanisms. And here, let's focus on two aspects. First, let's focus on the channels used to deliver the support. This is how we are going to deliver the support. And here, the questions that we need to ask is, should we have a central unit to deliver this support? Should we need a more distributed approach? Should we subcontract to third parties? So just to bring some clarity to this, let's use the scholarship program, the scholarship example again. If we want to implement a scholarship program, then maybe we want to keep a centralized structure where we receive all the applications, we do the selection centrally, and that would be much more efficient. But if we want to reach to multiple private sector companies with extension services across the country, across the region, then a centralized approach is not efficient. We will need a more distributed approach with extension services. And so this is something that we need to think about. What are the channels that we want to use for the delivery? Then to the second aspect, let's talk about the financial mechanisms. And the question here is, how do the funds flow and what are the requirements? And I want to reflect on this and say that when we have a policy instruments, we need to actually help the beneficiaries. We don't want to add them hurdles. So here we want to make sure that we have efficient disbursements times and that we are not adding administrative burdens to them, especially when we are talking about supporting small startups or small beneficiaries that usually have limited administrative capacity or limited resources. We don't want to add a burden to them. Let's go to the third one. Let's talk about capabilities. We saw a little bit about this. And this is something that I would like to say is that implementing the SDI policy instruments require very specialized skills. When we are going to start the implementation, we need to assess if we have the capacities that we need. Some examples, we need to ask ourselves if do we have the expertise to manage complex grant programs or evaluate grant programs? Like, for example, if we want to do a mission-oriented fund or grant program, that is quite difficult. So we need to know if we have this expertise. Similar for innovation projects, you need to have particular expertise to evaluate innovation projects. In a more general way, do we have capacity to draft the operational manuals for these instruments? The manuals that sets the step-by-step, the different characteristics, criteria for selection, and so on. Another example of questions is that if you want to have a specialized peer reviewer process, this is not always straightforward because sometimes in smaller countries, this niche expertise is often limited, and we may not have them available, or maybe we will have problems of conflict of interest. So we need to answer these questions. and make sure that we have the capabilities available. Finally, in the implementation process, I would like to think about the digital infrastructure. Right now, it's very clear that we need this type of infrastructure to make our processes more efficient. And actually, there are some case studies about the impact that these infrastructures can have. For example, scholarship programs we have one about scholarship programs receiving applications over paper, and the fact that they move into a digital system was very important to sustain this instrument in the future. So let me move into another area of focus, the management quality. Again, this refers to the leadership, the effectiveness of the leadership and the administrative structures. We talk about financial sustainability, and we know that this is a big challenge. We need to have adequate budgets. We need to be predictable. This last one, I think it's key, especially in our countries where the resources from the state are reduced, and we depend a lot on donor funding. So we're really not sure what is going to be the budget for the next year. So here, the challenge, I think that it is that we need to make the tough calls, right? We need to avoid having these zombie programs that are running that are running due to political commitments or symbolic value, but they don't have the resources to function effectively. Just an example that I would like to use is that if you, for example, you want to run a marathon and you don't have the water to hydrate yourself, well, you know what would be the results. So this is more or less this is the idea. In the organizational structure, here the ultimate goal is to have a structure that help us avoid improper influences, that help us have an effective coordination inside the organization and with other organizations. So here the call is to try to establish clear hierarchies, clear reporting lines for coordination and accountability, and in many cases, having a diverse management board set at the top of the organization is quite useful, because including representatives from various stakeholders can help us avoid certain influence, and while still maintaining operational oversight, it helps us avoid influence from certain actors. Then we talk about capital management. This is a human capital management. This is key. And the question here is, do we have the right people in the right roles? Are they happy to work with us? How do we retain the people that are well trained and motivated? And we know that this is an issue because yeah, when we have funding that comes from donor, or that it is project-based funding, we know that these key people are usually hired in limited duration contracts, and what happens when the funding is not there, they will probably leave. So this is one of the issues that we need to keep in mind. And here, what it is suggested is to try to create career paths within the public sector. Not forget investing in training and development of our staff, and of course, fostering a culture of innovation and excellence in our organization. This is key because it will help us attract talent. Then allow me to conclude this area, focusing on the process monitoring. We have been talking about clear reporting lines, processes, so we need to make sure that these are actually being used, being followed, that they're implemented. So we need to ensure that the operational procedures that we have in place are being followed correctly. Now let's talk about monitoring and evaluation. Dimo was talking a little bit about this, and here the message is that we need to establish the monitoring and evaluation frameworks from the beginning of the implementation process of the instruments. We need to understand very clearly how does success looks like, right? We need to know that before we start, and we need to have clear measures for this. We need to know where we start, where we want to go, and also, of course, understand how we are going to collect the data that will inform the indicators that we have designed in this framework. Another recommendation is that we try to articulate internal and external evaluations when we are trying to do this monitoring evaluation. Internal evaluations provide us quick feedback about what is happening, maybe can help us identify some procedural issues, but the external evaluations allows us to have a more impartial view on what is happening and can provide us insightful opportunities for improvement. And then we talk about evaluation, and then we need to turn this knowledge that we get through the evaluation into learnings. And this leads us to our next point, which are the learning systems. These are basically the mechanisms for continuous improvement, and this has to be based on experience. So here I would like to highlight a few elements. We need to be clear that it's very important to document what we experience. We need whatever we learn from our implementation, from our execution processes, we need to make sure that it is documented and it's accessible, and this information is accessible by anyone. We need to know what works and what doesn't work, right? We need to, and this is part of what we need to do to identify the challenges. Once we have this information, we identify these challenges and we make it very, very clearly, we highlight it very clearly, and we make sure that this also inform the original design of the instrument. So it helps us inform the new iteration of the policy design. Something that is important is that we need to set clear mechanisms for sharing knowledge, formal or informal, maybe creating networks of program managers. You know that there are multiple types of policy instruments across government, so maybe we allow them to talk to each other. Maybe they will identify common issues and try to find best practices to solve them. And what I was mentioning was, of course, try to modify the design of the policy instrument according to the experiences that we have been having and that we have been documenting. So to conclude, allow me to highlight a few points. First, just remember that the implementation process requires that all of these components work effectively. If one is really not working well, then we will have a system that is affected. I would like to also highlight the relevance or the need to really to match the delivery channels that we're going to implement to the objectives of our project, of our policy instrument. We need to not underestimate the importance of building the implementation capacity. Before launching any instrument, we need to ensure that the team has the right skills and competencies. Another point that I would like to highlight is that we all understand that securing stable funding is quite difficult, but still it is important. So we need to try to find mechanisms to do that. So maybe we need to start with small pilots that requires lower amounts of financial resources. It helps us then build credibility, and maybe after we build credibility, we can scale up these instruments. But for being able to scale up these instruments, we need the evaluation, we need the knowledge, we need to prove that what we are doing actually works. So don't forget evaluation, don't forget about the monitoring and evaluation frameworks, and those need to feed back the design process of the policy instruments. So thank you very much, and I give the floor back to you, Timo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. That was an excellent presentation. I've made taken some very interesting points for myself as well. Participants, please, if you have any questions for Manuel, please post this in the chat. He will happily take these up at our next Q&A. But for now, we're going to jump back into the reality of in this particular question, the Tanzanian context of STI, and we have with us Bitrina, who will discuss about some issues. Now, I have a question for Bitrina. Bitrina, do you want to do your Mentimeter questions first or after your presentation? Please let me know. You have disappeared. Okay. So I think what we'll do now is to move forward. What we'll do is Marianne, are you ready to go? Maybe we will
Hello.
Marianne, can you
Hello, I'm around.
Bitrina is back. Okay, so we'll follow the yes. So sorry, Marianne. Yes.
I'm battling with the power. Power is
Yes.
off. I'm running
Okay.
on my laptop battery, so I don't have
Okay.
time to waste. So
Yes.
quickly.
Do you want us to do the Mentimeter questions first or after your presentation?
After my
After.
presentation,
Okay.
I think
Bitrina, go.
it will be clearer.
Okay, fantastic. Go. Please share your slides and go. Or do you need us to share your slides? No, you've not sent us them. Please go. Start.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Very quickly, as I say that I'm running on a laptop battery since morning. I hope it will not die before I finish my presentation. So I'll go very quickly to very important slides. And the title of my presentation is basically talking about the things we have been talking about, but the experience of Africa. I have some wide experience given the kind of work I do, African experiences, but I will focus some points on specifically on Tanzania. I don't know why I cannot move. It's like I'm not.
Try using the page down or the arrows down.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
That is the outline of the presentation. And it's basically just, I think I will skip most of the slides because, although I did not participate in all the presentations, I had to put off my laptop so that I save the battery for my presentation. But looking at the program, basically, most of the things I will talk are just some preliminary that has already been discussed. So I'll be skipping some of the issues. So that is the outline of the presentation. The issue of public policy, we know what it is. Specifically, maybe I would just want to say, of course, it has already also discussed that when we are talking of STI is a systemic kind of endeavor. It's a system of actors, and most of the actors we know are producers, the innovators themselves, their customers, input supplier, knowledge organization, or all sorts of those organizations. So when you are creating a policy, designing a policy for an SDI system, you have to look at the actors. Basically, you have to kind of influence their decisions. Sometimes you have to build their capabilities. I mean, depending of the problem identified. Sometimes we have got to improve the linkage between the actors. In Africa, we talk a lot about linkage between investor and industry. So what are you have to understand the specific problem, and then you actually focus on that. Policy implementation. What I want to say, I'm emphasizing things that I have been observed in most Africa countries, specifically also Tanzania. I had some experiences of looking some specific policies. For instance, in East Africa, there is an article that I have published on that. I've looked up the policies. Basically, when you are talking about policies about being evidence-based, it's not really very clear whether they are evidence-based, but when it comes to also coordinating with other sectoral policies, because STI is not an end in itself, it's an end to an means to an end. So they had to be carefully coordinated with the other sectoral policies, depending on the priorities. For instance, when you are talking for STI for industrial policy, then STI has to be carefully coordinated with the industrial policy. And I think that is a bit of a problem also in the case of Africa. And implementation is a problem. And policy can only have impact if they are implemented. If they are not implemented, then they will not have impact. But also you cannot learn, because a blueprint plan it can be perfect. You know, you can look at it, it's very perfect, but when you implement it, it's a different story. So if you don't implement, you won't even know whether it is working. And I think this is also a challenge. We have been talking about also policy instruments. I looked at the video. Actually, even looking at the document, I had some time to look at. UNCTAD has a good number of instruments. But in my work, in my reading, I come across basically three major instruments that are financial incentives, laws and regulation is what we call soft instruments, where you don't have, well, you do not have any strict regulation, you don't even provide incentive, it's non-cohesive. So examples are scientific knowledge through conferences, research days, and sometimes technical standards that are actually disseminated. People can get access to technical standards. So my experience of looking at African STI policies, the blueprints, and experience with Tanzania, I know I have a colleague here from the ministry. We have policies, but most of the policies actually, I'll talk about this, stress on this later, a bit later. Normally, there is no a clear implementation strategy. A blueprint might be there, but implemented strategy will not be there. But what I'm saying is that when it comes to soft instruments, I have experience of actually noting, having influence on policy, because I work with a think tank that is producing knowledge for evidence-based science, technology, innovation. So sometimes we have feedback workshops, dissemination workshop, where we call the triple helix, the government, the industry, users of STI, and we also invite academics. So when we discuss, sometimes later on you find that some of the issues have been picked up by the government. We have examples, and some of them have been picked up by the private sector, simply because we were together actually discussing, giving feedback of our project. We also have the standards, in some of the surveys. There is one survey that I carried out in 2010, where there's a question in Tanzania, where the question on where the sources of information for innovation, where did the innovator get the sources? One of the mentioned sources is actually standards. For instance, standard from the Tanzania Bureau of Standards that somebody gets from the internet. So those soft instruments are being used, but they are not tied to a specific implementation strategy for a certain STI policy. They are just general. This I also want to emphasize, we have talked about this, but I want to emphasize this for Africa, because when we are talking about instruments, I think we talk about instruments at a second level. As far as I'm concerned, people have to really be committed, understand, and want to know how to design a workable STI policy, because without that, even learning what instrument, what challenges might not be, even people will not take it seriously. But I think this is a very important something. For Africa, I'm saying this is unique for Africa because knowledge markets are not there to allocate resources to innovation, to the production dissemination of knowledge. Markets are extremely weak. I'm saying this because if you compare like rich countries, like the examples that have been given, like South Korea and elsewhere in rich countries, market alone can do something, especially when you talk about economic kind of knowledge. The private sector are reaching out to the universities, to the R&D organizations on their own. They are looking for knowledge. That thing is not there in Africa. So you have to have a well thought out a policy on that. For rich countries, maybe weak markets are weak for things like maybe issues, technology for environment, for social inclusion. But for Africa, it's just everywhere. Actually, the policy making in Africa is very complex because market works for none, not even for economic, where elsewhere for economic it is working. So when you look now, the troubling thing is that is what I have been experiencing, is that when you look at the policies, science, technology, innovation policies, and you look at development kind of oriented policies, you feel like they are not, they are not well coordinated. We can have policies, maybe industrial policies. We can have generally growth policies, but they are not really you don't see a lot of STI being inculcated in that. And nobody really, when it comes to STI policy, I feel like this is my feeling, it's not given priority. But what we are saying is that these are very important. In Africa, like we talk about adding value to natural resources, we are talking about structural transformation, add value to our natural resources to develop, to generate employment and even growth, inclusive growth. But without that, without the use of STI, that is not possible. It won't work. So I just wanted to emphasize this. I know our policy people are here. I think we really need to, this is awareness is one of the issues, very important issue that we should consider. So let me talk some specific, some areas for Tanzania. Tanzania is for me is a very unique African countries when it comes to STI policy, because Tanzania had a policy very early in the days, in the early 80s. Our first policy came in 1985. And I don't know by then how many African countries have policies, because many African countries now have STI policies, but those are recent. But Tanzania had a policy very quite early. And the challenges that I've been talking about, like the coordination between science, technology, innovation policies and economic policies and other sectoral policies, Tanzania understood this. It's very clearly stated, very impressive, like the green thing line I have indicated in my slide. It's clearly indicated in this priority setting. The policy states that science, technology should be used to solve problems in key economic and social welfare sectors. It's very clear, so it's very impressive. So, but it's now 40 years, but Tanzania is still a least developed country. So one wonder why, what is happening, and I think the problem lies in all or any of the following. I came across in my dealing with policy issues this some diagram from Kingdom 1995, and looking at my experiences, looking at the policies, I think this is really the thing. You know, there are three spheres in the policy process, and you only can have an well-designed and impactful policy when you have that intersection of the three spheres. You have the problem sphere, you have the policy sphere, you have the politics sphere. So you have problems, policies, and politics. These things are actually make up a workable policy. So when we talk about the problem sphere, you know, we say that public policies are actually tools that government use to address problems in any sector. For STI, is to address problem in the STI system. But you have to correctly identify the problems, and you have to know the causes of the problem. Yeah? For instance, the university industry linkage, this is something that we discuss a lot, you know. And we know that this linkage is weak, but I'm not very sure why. Why is it weak? If you don't know, you cannot address it. So, and the policy sphere, then after understanding the problem and the causes, then you actually design your policy, use policy instruments, you use the right instruments. And at the end of the day, when it comes to implementation now, you have to have a political will that can actually make resources available to implement and all the processes that you know. So these are three things. If they interact, if everything is correct, then we can have an impactful policy. But I do not have, I cannot say anything. I only have hypotheses on where the problem is. Is it the identification of the problem? That could be the reason, because we actually don't carry out STI policy related research. You know, it's like it's not understood. I have understanding of African-wide when it comes to that problem because of the network I am involved in. That research is not done. Innovation studies, science, technology, innovation, policy research is not done. But if you don't do that, then I don't know how else problem can be identified and their causes. So, but I don't know exactly where the problem is. So I think that is where we are coming to the Mentimeter demo. These are my questions. So of the three spheres, which one do you think is the most important?
Yeah. So we'll have our colleague Min. Yes, very good. I formulate them slightly differently so we get some more effective answers because you know. But Min, can you unshare, and Min will take over now with the Mentimeter, please. Bettina, thank you very much. I think there's some questions coming along here, and I will post them to you in the Q&A that follows. Okay. Can you please unshare now? So here we go. First question is, of the three spheres, which do you think is most important? Choose one, two, or three. You can choose more than one. How many we have? Five answers so far out of 80. You can also use the link to log on if you want with your laptop. So who's in the lead? Political will. Political will is in the lead. Policy proposals are there. As Bettina, as you observed in your experience, you know, we have good policy proposals, massively good policy proposals. Problem is at the other end, I suppose. You know, so this is reflecting your discussion quite well. So let's have a few more. Will the political will become super dominant? Yes, it's becoming very dominant now, and Yeah, policy proposals still not so much of an issue here. How many we have? 20. We need at least half of the answers. Please, everyone, send in your votes. Either use the QR code or click on the link and send us your votes. How are we doing there? 28 votes out of 84. We need a few more, please. Please, a few more votes. So I think the trend is going towards political will for implementation with appropriate instruments. Betrina, is it the political will or with the appropriate instruments? Which is between those two? Which one is the more difficult one? You can split that last one, I think. No? Okay, I think there's a slight dominance of political will. So let's go on to the next question. Thank you everyone for voting. One more question. Katrina, this is going into your research, your next research paper, I suppose. So, which is the most problematic for Africa STI's policy? So, where's the challenge here? So this is an interesting question, slightly formulated slightly differently. So again, we're having this. Yes, I think the answer is clear, and you've picked up on a lot of really important points. But please hang on, even with your low battery laptop. There are some interesting comments and questions in the chat. We'll get back to you in a presentation or two. So thank you, Betrina. Thank you very much, Min. I think you can stop with the Mentimeter, and let's go on to our next presenter, Marianne Dorcas.
Yeah,
Marianne Dorcas is
yeah.
from Ghana.
My battery is dying, so please. It's so sorry, but
Absolutely.
I'm happy
No.
that it
You made
happened.
it. You made it. You made it. Okay, so let's give the floor now to Marianne. Marianne, thank you for joining us. You are towards the end, but I hope the impact will be greater. Having had all this theoretical learning, now let's have some practical insight on how it is to actually conduct a policy instrument in Ghana. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And do you see my screen?
I see your screen, but it's not in the presentation mode. It's in the draft mode. Do you want to click on the actual at the bottom, or just hit, I think, F5? Yeah, there you go. Maybe that does that work?
Okay, so do you see?
Okay, there we go. That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank
So
you.
thank you very much once again for this opportunity. So with all these discussions, I'm in the space of being in the national research system and the implementation of STI and the what we have been going through. So this is the outline for my presentation. I'll touch a bit on the CSIR, the Ghana STI, just an introduction, the technology generation research and development policy that we have developed at the CSIR, that's Council for Scientific and Industrial Research Ghana, based on the national STI, the issue that has already come up in the one of the Mentimeter as funding, the grant mechanism we have put in place, and also revolving fund mechanism that we are using to sustain our research. We've established an endowment fund. The National Research Fund is now being passed into law. So after that, we'll look at the way forward. So the CSIR in Ghana is the foremost research and innovation technology generation organization looking at effectively and efficiently exploiting social science and technology innovation for socio-economic development Our focus areas are on environment, industry, some aspects of public health, social sciences, and all looking at ensuring that there's the science culture in the civil society. We have our mission, and the vision is to be the leading STI institute for accelerated socioeconomic development. In 2023, we developed our current strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan. The link is there for you to access. So the CSIR is a regional center of excellence under CORAF initiative, CORAF, which is under the ECOWAS, and we are the regional center of excellence for research in root and tuber crops. And we have 13 institutions with our footprints all over the country. So you find us wherever you are in the country. Now, focusing on the STI policy in Ghana, the vision is to position Ghana as a globally competitive and productive nation, harnessing human and natural development with the focus on STI. Sorry, I wanted to go back and I'm going forward. Okay, sorry. So, and it's all aiming at ensuring that we are a knowledge-based nation and use STI to transform our economy by 2020. Implementation will actually transit our country into an all-inclusive knowledge-based society. And there are about 7 key objectives. Key among the objectives is to progressively move to 1% of investment, private sector investment in research and development at the pace of about 2.2% per year over 7 years. So by 2030, we should be there. The current STI policy has been revised and will soon be out for everyone to access. This is being worked on at the ministry. So we also have focus on human capacity development, strengthening partnership to run the STI and enhance stability, environmental management, foster the adoption and application of frontier technologies, and integrate space science and technology into socio-economic sectors. Now, it all comes down to funding. We all have the issue of limited funding. The challenge of R&D funding is here with us, and the 1% GDP expenditure to be dedicated to research and development is, if we're getting the numbers right, Ghana, we are only at 0.32%, not yet at 1%, and we are using advocacy to ensure that we get to that point. So currently, the funding sources that we are looking at for the STI, the national STI, we are looking internally, we are looking externally. The National Research Fund was passed into law last year, so we are hoping that it will be operationalized soon for us to benefit. And strategically, the sector, the STI sector is also collaborating with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Agriculture, Communication, Education, and Health. It's interesting to know that for us, the research, agriculture research is under the Ministry of Environment, Science, and Technology. It's not under the Ministry of Agriculture or Education. So that gives us a peculiar space. And in line with that, the CSIR developed the Technology Generation Research and Development Policy, which is that is also online at on our website. So the principles to ensure that we give a safe operating space for researchers to work and to ensure quality, make our research of good standard, of international standard, provide a platform for researchers to collaborate with internally and externally, effectively commercialize their research outputs by getting the private sector buy-in, and have effective support for resource mobilization for enhanced research. So in line with that, we have the resource mobilization and private sector engagement, which is looking at maintaining a diverse donor-based ecosystem and provide guidelines for resource mobilization with the private sector, identifying new partners and networks that will ensure that current research that we develop is attractive, and there's funding for to support that research. And the range of resources that we've mobilized focuses on international donor funding for R&D, domestic funding for R&D, multilateral and bilateral approach to source for funding for research. We currently have the CSIR Endowment Fund, and our project offices established are enhancing the STI interventions for the R&D. Now, another component we have had to look at is the internally generated funds. So internally generated funds to drive these initiatives, implementation of STI policies, is the outputs of our research products, offering technical services. We offer consultancies and training services for those in our value chain. And we are capitalizing on grants of external sources, government contracts, execute contracts from entrepreneurs. We capitalize on internally mobilized funds, commercialization, which has a high, although has a high risk. We consider joint venture capital in interventions, and even where necessary, opt for loans to deliver. So the obvious challenge is within the CSIR. In Ghana, the CSIR visibility has been a challenge because of the those we ride with. At times, our credits, no due credit is given to us. Over the years, we've been over-reliant on donor sources for our research. So there's the donor fatigue, and governments committing to conduct basic research, as has come up in the previous Metimeter, the political will. So for capital, we expenditure, we getting approximately 1% for goods and services, about 1% of the request. And the fact that we in the sub-region have shaped our research for the poor. And so I keep saying, if you label anything as poor, it will remain poor. If you put cash to it, it will bring cash. So the development and enforcement of policies within our sub-region and national policies can shift the status quo. So for a sustainable funding, currently we are paid by government. We compete in the international space for research funds and donor funds. Sometimes we get support from the government, where it's maybe World Bank funding, and we apply for grants, small grants. We apply for educational support for our researchers. And the limitations that come with this situation is the research objective is set by the donor. There's donor fatigue. The competition is very keen, and the capacity we build may not be channeled for national agenda, and ultimately leads to brain drain. So this is a tall list of collaborators that our various institutes have had to work with over the years. The list is longer than this. I just focus on a few. So the various institutes and the list of collaborators they have been working with over the years. So it brings a lot of noise within the space of implementation and execution of some policies. The best case scenarios would have been for the researchers to focus on their research to do, so long as the funds are available, we're looking at the best case scenario where we will collaborate with industry will own the research and industry will buy the research findings and upscale it, because we have a lot that is more or less pilot and has to be upskilled, and industry will demand training from research, not research always going after them to give training. This will enhance the visibility of the research community, not only in the CSIR, but in the universities, because we collaborate closely with the universities. Adequate funding for continuous improvement and human capacity building, that will be a best case scenario. Dedicated systems to enhance commercialization of our research findings, the science and technology innovation parks. Once we have these established for, and it's good for agriculture, we have some initiatives from CORAF, and we're also looking at a bottom-up approach. We've been using it, but even funding to support continuous implementation of this bottom-up approach to get research objectives has been limited. Then the research objectives, when you set it in that nature, follows national agenda, gives a robust system for prioritizing national research approach and national policies for annual budgetary allocation to research. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Select Committee for STI was with the CSIR, and we are advocating with them to push our agenda. And so in line with all these, the CSIR in 2016 established the CSIR grant mechanism, where every project, you saw the tall list of developers we work with, every project is taxed 15% of the fund, and at the institute level, so at each of the 13 institutes, this is happening. And of that 15%, another 15% is transferred to the head office, and we pull this into a kitty and use it to fund research, basic research that we have identified as national priorities. And so one institute can get, and that institute should have contributed to the fund. So that institute gets the support, and you have to collaborate with another institute which could not provide for the fund into the fund, and the output should be commercial driven, and this will help with this, how well it's sustainable. We've also had the initiative of having a revolving fund mechanism where research products are commercialized and the funds are plowed back into research to sustain the system. And we've also established the CSR Endowment Fund last year, which has is targeting $20 million US. We've tagged it supporting science, supporting science, transforming communities. So the main objective is to generate a consistent and stable flow of financial resources to support research and technology innovations and to drive social inclusion. And this is a fund that even the researchers are donating. Some researchers have committed to voluntarily donate 1% of their basic salary every month into the fund. So it's expected that with this fund, that we can drive innovations and technology, we develop technologies and transfer them. It will empower the scientists to put the scientists in a very comfortable space. It will enhance reputation on global stand, and it will be of global standing. It will ensure institutional resilience and community and continuity. It will promote social inclusion, sustainable development, and amplify the social impact of the CSIR. So now the National Research Fund, as I mentioned, was as the Act of Parliament 2019 came into force last year. We have the presidential set to it. It currently sits with the Ministry of Education. The committee, the CSIR, sits on it, although the initiative started with the CSIR and then the Ministry for Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation at that time. Now it sits with the Ministry of Education, so the Ministry for Environment, Science and Technology has a seat there to ensure that funding is made available for our research and development and innovations. Now, the source of the funding is 50 million Ghana cedis, being a seed fund from the government into the fund, and we are looking at 1% gross GDP that Parliament has to annually bring into that fund. And so going forward, we are looking at having an aggressive initiatives. I mean, CSIR, we have had to put in place aggressive interventions, initiatives, the CSIR competitive grant scheme, CSIR retooling, our endowment fund, our networks with the CGs, EU applications, the ECOWAS sub-region, CORAF, with some initiatives with World Bank, the Food Systems Resilience Program, and collaborating with a tall list of countries, just a few listed here, and MOUs with private sector. So take home, we are looking at stronger partnership, enhanced visibility, bigger platforms like this to showcase our abilities required, and all these require more private sector-led initiative and make the system sustainable, and change of attitude from our private sector players, because it's being government for free, and we all looking forward to a win-win agreement situation to ensure a sustainable source of funding for R&D to support the STI initiatives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Beatrice. That was a very interesting insight from a practitioner, someone who actually manages a particular policy instrument within your institution. And I have a few questions for you, but I will save that for later. Let's now go on to our last but not least presentation. Alessandro, are you there? Alessandro Bello?
Hi,
yes.
everyone.
So, Alessandro, welcome. Thank you for your patience. Alessandro, what can I say? Go. It's
Thank
all
you.
the ball's in your court. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to share my screen. Please let me know whenever you can see my presentation. Can you confirm? Can you see it?
You are in draft mode. You're not in presentation mode.
Yeah, can you see it now?
Yep, that's good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to participate on this webinar on STI policy and policy instrument for Africa. My intervention is going to be more on let's say, related to what has just been discussed in Ghana, and also building a national research and innovation funding mechanism. It's some sort of trend topic. There is many countries that are recently have started developing one. So what I'm going to do today, it's really to provide some sort of what do we mean when we are referring, at least in this context, to National Research and Innovation Funding Mechanism, why they are important, what is the situation in the region. We have just seen the Ghana one, but let's see also in other countries, and also what are some lessons learned from different countries that have already developed and set up a research and funding mechanism. What are the common challenges and strategies, let's say, that to overcome these challenges? So very briefly, so what do we mean by national research innovation funding? In this context, what we're referring to include the agency type of organization and funds of funds used by countries to either mobilize, provide or deliver financial resources for scientific research and innovation activities. And these have usually a significant impact or trying to have a significant impact on the national research and innovation system and budget, and are primarily funded through national public funding. There are a plethora of other funds that are administered by sectorial ministries, such as those for agriculture or specific for health or environment or industry. But in this case, we're really focusing on established organizations that are, for instance, national innovation funds or innovation agencies that are dedicated to mobilizing, receiving and allocating funds for research and innovation. And within the regions, there are different type. There are those that are merely focused on research, and we have seen also by the conversation we were having this morning. At the very beginning, the emphasis was more on research. Now it's shifting also to include also innovation. Well, you can see that also in when we look at national research funding and the National Innovation Institute. And for instance, in the case of South Africa, they have, in Kenya also, they have two separate one an RF focused on national supporting research, while a specific agency such as the Kenya National Innovation Agency or the Technology Innovation Agency of South Africa specifically focus on innovation, while others are focused on both national, for instance, the case of in DRC of the National Fund for Scientific Research and Technological Innovation. But clearly, looking at the evolution of this fund, we can clearly see that at the very beginning, they were merely more focused on research, and now they are including also innovation. Why do we need the National Research and Innovation Funding Mechanism? Well, it was clear from the previous presentation and from others, but really looking at what they are doing in the continent and outside, they are increasing funding for research and innovation. They are encouraging the creation and development of innovative companies, promoting cutting-edge research in areas of strategic importance to national competitiveness. They are stimulating employment and economic growth through innovation commercialization, strengthening country position on the international stage as hub of innovation and technological know-how. And they are also a catalyst for attracting foreign development, FDI, and creating favorable R&I ecosystem that attract investors. But also, I think that there is a need for an entrepreneurial state that can tackle high-risk, capital-intensive projects that are often left unaddressed by private sector actors. And so we need to go beyond usual one of fixing market failure, where the public sector really takes an active role in shaping and creating markets. And innovation, regional, national research and innovation funding mechanism can really be a powerful tool for that, for policymakers also in facilitating a clean innovation shift to meet the new industrial needs for long-term and high-risk or high-reward technologies that have yet to find market support. And we can see also that it's having a different impact and return. And for instance, in Canada, there was a significant then interest from industry, and out of the 8.2 billion in contribution, it brought 72 billion in private sector investment, but also in Côte d'Ivoire, where they managed to attract both national but also international partners on Rwanda that increased the scientific and technological production. But also, and I would say also to stress, this funding mechanism may be more likely to fund studies that align with the national political and social goals. And sometimes the lack of funding, and I think that we have seen in different countries, it's not only widening the gap between policy and practices, but it's also increased the national researchers' reliance on international research funding and responsive that are more responsive to international agenda and not necessarily, not always to national priorities. So, what is the situation in the region? This is an interesting map that came out from a study done by within the framework of the OECPS Research Policy Support Facility project that was running from 2020 and finished 2 months ago in 2025. It was funded by the European Union and implemented by the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States. Well, clearly here, what you can see is that there is a number of countries that is establishing this type of R&I funding mechanism in the region. We have, although only 20, so not all the countries have one set up. But the interesting thing is that while we had only 3 before 2000 and 10 already between 2003 and 2017, in the last 4 years, we have 7. So you can really see that it's becoming an interest for different policymakers, and it really is a trend topic, and that countries are really paying a lot of attention to try to build a specific and national funding R&I mechanism. And still several are in the process of establishing one, just to mention, for instance, Gambia or Togo. But this is just the same in other visualization. Something that it's very interesting, looking at the different existing R&I funding mechanism in the region, is that as clearly most of them are located under the ministry in charge of science, technology, innovation, though under some there are also under directly the presidential authorities. That's the case, for instance, of ABRIVT, that it's the Beninese Agency for Research and Innovation. And other funds are, for instance, administered by National Commission of Science, Technology, Innovation. For instance, the case of the National Research Science Technology Fund in Namibia. And others have really a legal personality and administrative autonomy, such as the ANER FNI in Mozambique. And others are instead established and invested in ministry and administered in accordance with its direction, the Science Technology Fund, for instance, in Mali. Something, though, that it was some sort of consistent across all the countries is that most of them have as a core mission to mobilize resources, to conduct capacity building, to promote innovation, to target technology transfer. And also interesting agencies such as the TIA in South Africa is emphasizing also bridging the gap between research and commercialization. And they are channeling, there is a type over there, and delivering funds to R&I performance through most of them. It's most widely used. It's the open competitive financing. They also through collaborative research grants, innovation grants or award, institutional support, and commercialization and technology transfer support. Now, analyzing those that have already implemented, what we can see, what are the lessons learned, what can be of inspiration for countries that would like to set a new funding mechanism up. Well, and we can say that many countries have a roadmap or a planning process, of course, but there is not uniform in terms of methodology, and this might depend on the level also of the R&I maturity of the countries. Also, another important aspect is that establishing and operationally effective R&I funding mechanism, that's not an easy task because it requires knowledge-intensive and also technical expertise. Though we can identify around 7 main steps in the process of establishing a public R&I funding mechanism. And for instance, the one is at the very basis is to build political and public constituencies. We need champions. If there is limited or no public or political support for R&I or for this type of instrument, it will be very difficult then for the government to establish one. It's important to raise awareness And this is very interesting, the case, for instance, of in Kenya, where the members of the parliaments with the scientific background were really instrumental in promoting the enactment of the National Science, Technology and Innovation Act back in 2013, which then led to the creation of the NRF and Kenya. After that, what is also important is to understand the needs, conduct this needs assessment of the country's R&I ecosystem to assess the landscape, the actors, but also the human resource, the needs that these funds will need to cover, and so to provide some sorts of clear rationale for establishing this funding mechanism, as well as its governance structures and the resources also of this mechanism. That was the case, for instance, of Togo and Gambia that requested the support of the OECPS R&I PSF for conducting one, or Namibia through the Science Granting Council initiative. Once we have this feasibility study, and based on it, there is most of the countries, they have prepared a policy memorandum that is then submitted to the cabinet or the executive branch of the government, which then leads to the legislation, the creation of a bill, a law, which contain all the provision of the powers, the governments, the resourcing of the funding ecosystems. Once this is set, then there is moving towards the structure, the governing of the structure and establishing of the secretariat. Usually it's done from, it's the responsible of Ministry of SDI that appoints the members of the board. In the case, for instance, of Botswana, it's the minister responsible for science, technology, innovation of the Botswana that appoints the Botswana Innovation Fund to oversee the fund's implementation. And this board, after it's created, it it sort of operationalize the fund itself by starting to channel or delivering funds to R&I performance. And this is really, it depends on the budgetary levels, it depends on the allocation set by parliaments, the type of instruments that are going to be funded in that sense. And while these are steps that have come out from different countries, these are just indicative actions that can be taken by a country that is interested in developing this type of R&I funding mechanism based on the experience of other countries. But each country, it's important that make informed decision on how to navigate through these critical steps. And this really depending on the peculiar economic and political conditions, as well as of the capacity of its R&I ecosystems. But something that is very important is that if you want to have a functioning funds, you need to have a robust resource mobilization strategy that can ensure funding and resources. And it's not uncommon, unfortunately, in many countries, beyond also the region, to have a funding mechanism to be legally established, but then the government or the legislature fails to provide the necessary resources for its operationalizations. And this can be through government's funds. Interesting, the case, for instance, of South Africa, where parliaments and the national treasury must provide funds to funding the mechanism dedicated to research and innovation, though there is no specific budget target set by legislation for determining the resources allocated to the funding mechanism. It can be through mobilization of resources through royalties on sales contracts of research results and patenting, such as in the case of Burkina Faso and Mali. It can be through commercialization of technology. It can be through profiling funding mechanism, such as is doing the FONSTI in Côte d'Ivoire, or it can even be through consortia of funders, such as they are doing NRF in South Africa and NEFAST of Tanzania. And just closing with the two more things. First, what are the common challenges? And this is echoing basically also what has been seen before in other presentation, also common challenges in other operational instruments, the weak political commitment, the budgetary constraints for especially the sustainability of funding to avoid issues as what we were saying, to have a mechanism that cannot be operational or effective due to the lack of funds. To have strong technical expertise, and that was sometimes a challenge, and also the limited capacity for assessment of outcomes and impacts. And we are going to see it later too, but was seen before. We need to have in place strong monitoring and evaluation and learning assessment for understanding what is working, what's not working. And then from the very outset, there is a limited private sector engagement. So what we can do to overcome these challenges? First is, of course, from the very, very beginning, trying to create awareness, to have a secure political support, and always also from the very beginning to try to engage and boost the private sector engagement. That it's very clear, it cannot be just rely on the government funds, but it has to go beyond. And also it cannot just rely on international donors and partners, because if the priority then shifts, then can be an issue for the mechanism itself. And it's also important to develop a core capacity, build capacity, use capacity, but also retain those capacities within these R&I funding mechanisms. Human capacity, capital, governance in terms of social capitals and partnerships, and we need to develop technical and managerial expertise. And also, as we were saying, we need to enhance the outcome impact assessment capacity and promote the establishment of mutual monitoring and evaluation learning platforms. With this, I think just let me closing with say that research and innovation is not a cost. It's really an investment in the Africa's futures. And we need to have in place the proper instruments for supporting this. Thank you. And Dimo, over to you.
Thank you, Alessandro. That was an excellent presentation, struck many points. And also because of your work with the OICPS, you have a very fantastic overview of the situation on the African continent, which is absolutely you're a treasure of knowledge and wisdom. So thank you very much. I'd like to propose now that we do. I think we've had a lot of inputs, a lot of discussions. The chat has been very active. We've posted some questions to our previous set of panelists. The chat is still open for a couple of more questions. So if you like to post those questions now, please do them right now in the next minute or two. Meantime, I'm going to ask Min to present us with the last Mentimeter. It is a word cloud, and it's just to sum up some of your impressions, some of your thoughts that you've had during these last rather extensive 3 hours. So please log on to the Mentimeter, click on the actual QR or on the link, and try to tell us what is your key takeaway message in 2 words maximum from this session. Think deeply, but not too long, because we need to all go to lunch. I suppose many of us are hungry by now. It's been quite a good but intensive session. But also post a question or two if you like in the chat, and we'll see if we can pick up on one or the other of them in the last few minutes that we have. So we are yet to receive enabling policies. Okay, very good. Let's see if we can have some more inputs. Don't overthink it. I think you've had, enough scarce funding monitoring challenges. Very good. Very good. All these things that we've picked up on today, some were formulated more theoretically, some were formulated more through practical examples or through real world practice in Tanzania and Ghana, also throughout the continent. in the ECOWAS region. So I think we had a lot of regional input that was really relevant, that shows the true situation, gives food for thought on how to move forward in the African continent. Of course, each country is specific, has its own challenges, but there are a number of universals. We see them having here, informative. I'll take that as being, better awareness, better knowledge, but funding remains clearly at the center. It always does, doesn't it? That's where the buck stops. It's at the money. A bit of a tautology there, but yes, we have information, well-designed policies, funding. Let's have a few more replies. We have I see in the link, we have a comment from the chat saying, I think if governments in Africa would treat SDI policy like COVID-19, political commitment to fund and implement would surge. Would anyone of the speakers the panelists like to pick up on that? Do we need a crisis of that measure to get into action? Is this what is needed? Is there a threshold of pain that is needed in order for something to happen? Would anyone like to take that? Fernando, maybe you would like to take that. Where's the threshold that activates innovation systems into real energy levels?
Thanks. Having had one and not seen much changes, maybe that's not what it needs only, right? I think this issue is important, that it's been a process of transforming the interest, not only in this region, but in generally in the other developing regions. You see the lack of innovation or lack of STI capacities reflects a lot on poverty levels and economic backwardness. So I don't think it's enough. We saw actually that was a very clear example of how the countries which have a low level of STI capacities can be heavily penalized by something like this. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's a question that I would turn back to the participants in their own fields, to what extent they see this discussion coming up. But I would certainly say, having gone through one and not seen much of the transformation, maybe that's not the only one. So there's also more structural issues there that we need to address, and yeah, that's an open conversation.
Thank you, Fernando. Just to underline that, I think once we understand that something is a structural issue, then the idea of prioritization kind of looks very challenging, because how do you prioritize something that consists of 7, 8, 10 structural challenges? So okay, so I think the Mentimeter has nicely shown where we have some the biggest concern also in the actual chat. So Min, thank you for that. I think this is okay. So many thanks to all the panelists for their excellent presentations, for their willingness to stay on and engage with questions, engage with discussions in the chat and so forth. Just to make a very brief summary of some of the things that impressed me. Of course, everyone will have their own idea. Some of my takeaways is that, of course, we need a constant updating and reflection on our policy instruments for STI, in particular as new technologies are coming up, accelerating exponentially. We need to have sometimes extensive and very deep policy mixes to achieve socioeconomic goals, and sometimes we can really benefit from regional coordination or local coordination to try to develop some kind of synergies or symbiosis between challenges. A systemic approach is needed not only at the top level of policy, but also at a very granular level, whether this is developing a quality management for funding bodies, or is it for actually managing scientific research? Without a systemic approach, without clearly defined methodologies, decision making then becomes fairly random, and coordination becomes difficult. In particular, the coordination between science and then the technologists and innovators. We find, at least in my work, I find this problem. I call it from lab to the field. Things do get developed in labs. New technologies kind of see the light, not in such an applied way, but more on the theoretical side. But when it comes to doing that prototype, taking it to firms and farms and so forth, we struggle as long as there are grants and donor funding available. The kind of work, once that's gone, we fall back into business as usual. I think in order to not have this type of problems, one of the things is that we need to deeply understand the actual policy instruments that are used for implementation. Clearly, research grants, they come, they provide support for a couple of years doing a research project, and then they go away. So expectations that a research grant can trigger some kind of high level of sustainability in a particular technological area can be, it might, but it doesn't really have to be. We need to understand the underlying problems and challenges. I think one of the panelists said that something that also struck me is that introducing policy instruments, designing and introducing policy instruments must not add hurdles. From my research, the way I phrased it was that any new policy and policy instrument must not increase uncertainty. All policies have to work in decreasing uncertainty. The first test for any policy instrument is the question of, does it increase uncertainty for the subjects or beneficiaries or whoever these people are, individuals, firms, farms, etc. And I think this is really an important thing to think about. No point in dreaming up a fantastic, technologically sophisticated policy instrument if the hurdles for implementation on the side of those who are the users, the ultimate beneficiaries, the citizens, so forth, are very high. And then the question of where do we introduce learning? We all have to understand that lifelong learning is a thing, in particularly for our highest level politicians, parliamentarians, and so forth. And I think it was in Marian's discussion that she cited at one point that yes, it's really important to have these core competent units of scientists and researchers who can then explain, engage with public bodies and parliament and parliamentary commissions and so forth, wherever the decision-making locuses are, and provide, a knowledgeable and a technically expert opinion so that the decision makers don't have to rely on reading magazines and looking at stuff online, which nowadays, as we know, is a very dubious quality. Often, in fact, the biggest problem is trying to separate what is true from what isn't. Not there is a lot of good stuff out there, but which one it is. Some other things, I think that clearly we are, a lot of the stuff we're doing here, one foot is in the market failures, but we should not separate this idea of market failures from the challenges and implementation strategies as well. So we have then, systemic failures as well as what is this permanent question of what does it all mean? Where does it all actually lead to? Finally, perhaps, and just quoting, not quoting, but paraphrasing some things that struck me in Alessandro's discussion, but also Manuel, is this concept of operational capacity and management ability in terms of technical and technological expertise, not in the actual technological field of innovation, but here the example was, okay, if you want to run a research fund, or if you want to run an SME innovation fund. So the people who establish the actual fund, who manage it and so forth, that is not a universal type of expertise and competence that needs to be built. There are problems, there are challenges, there are many failures in this field because of a lack of competence and so forth. So the actual, from a very granular level to top level priorities, what is this fund supposed to do, to how will the actual, for example, request or the call for proposals actually look like? What filters do you use? Do you ask for joint applications, entrepreneur researcher? Will you require people to have tertiary and above level of qualifications or not? Is this positive or negative? A lot of questions arise. These can only be reflected on by people who have managerial expertise in implementing policy instruments, together with their deep knowledge of the actual local environment. And I think this is something that also one of the panelists said, is that you need to know your environment very well. You need to know your stakeholders, you need to know your challenges, you need to be aware of the politics, of the broader politics in the region as well, and so forth. So this makes this whole STI thing very challenging, but also very stimulating and demanding, both intellectually and also as a practitioner, and for someone wanting to do some good, some betterment for their own national and local socioeconomic development. So with that I will finish.